What if we could trace the exact path Moses and the Israelites took through the desert and uncover hidden truths behind the greatest miracle of the Old Testament? Join us as we reveal the Exodus journey like never before, with new discoveries that will change your perspective on God's miraculous power. Today, we embark on a journey through the Exodus story, pinpointing crucial locations on the map that shaped Israel's escape from Egypt. We'll explore two theories about the Red Sea crossing and dive into the significance of these places, both historically and spiritually. We'll explore the different routes the Israelites could have taken during the Exodus, examining the evidence and the miracles involved. We'll look at the debate over Mount Sinai's location and reflect on how we can apply the spiritual lessons from this monumental journey to our lives today. Yatasi. 1. The two camps of thought. The Exodus of Moses and the Israelites is one of the most monumental stories in the Bible. But what if we told you there are two widely debated locations where this miraculous event may have taken place? While the story of the parting of the Red Sea is well known, the exact location where this miracle occurred has sparked countless debates among scholars, theologians, and archaeologists. Today, we'll delve into these two theories and explore how they shape our understanding of God's power. The first theory is based on the idea that the crossing took place near the northern part of the Red Sea, close to the shallow lakes that exist in this area. This theory is grounded in the concept of the Wind Setdown Theory, a natural phenomenon where a strong wind can push water to one side, creating a temporary dry path through shallow waters. According to this theory, the Israelites may have crossed through one of these lakes, which could have been parted by the wind as described in the Bible. The second theory suggests that the crossing happened much further south near the Gulf of Aqaba, over 150 miles away from Egypt. This location offers a much more dramatic crossing with deeper waters, which some believe would be a more fitting stage for the miraculous event described in the Bible. The theory here focuses on the idea that the sea was parted in a more grand and powerful manner, creating towering walls of water on both sides, just as the Bible describes. For many, this dramatic miracle is more in line with the grandeur of God's power in the Exodus story. While both theories point to significant historical and geographical features, it's important to recognize that both focus on the same fundamental truth. God's power transcends human understanding and will accomplish what He desires, regardless of the scale or manner in which it occurs. What's fascinating about this debate isn't necessarily which location is correct. It's the reminder that God's plan for His people is unwavering. Whether the crossing occurred in shallow water or deep water, the miracle still stands as a testimony to God's faithfulness and might. The Exodus story reminds us that even when we face seemingly insurmountable challenges, God is already at work, preparing a way for us to move forward. In our own lives, we often face moments where the truth or the way forward seems uncertain. Just as these two theories offer different perspectives on the location of the Red Sea crossing, we too may encounter multiple paths in our journeys. The key takeaway here is trusting that God's plan is always unfolding, even when we don't have all the answers. We may not always understand how or when God will deliver us, but we can rest in the assurance that He is at work in every season of our lives. Do we trust God's timing even when it's unclear or doesn't fit our expectations? What are the areas of your life where you're struggling to see the path forward, and how can you trust that God is making a way for you, just as He did for the Israelites? 2. Wind Setdown Theory and the first location. As we delve deeper into the debate about where the parting of the Red Sea occurred, one of the most compelling theories is the Wind Setdown Theory, which suggests that God used the natural phenomenon of wind to part the waters, creating a path for the Israelites to escape from Pharaoh's army. The Wind Setdown Theory is based on a scientific principle where a strong wind can push water away from one side of a body of water, allowing the land underneath to dry and reveal a path. The theory suggests that, in this case, God used the wind to drive back the waters of the Red Sea, creating a temporary dry path for the Israelites to walk through. This explanation fits with the biblical account, which describes a strong east wind that blew throughout the night, dividing the waters so that the Israelites could pass on dry ground. This is not just a mystical event, but also a natural one, God working through the elements to bring about His will. When we consider the geography of the northern part of the Red Sea, we find areas with relatively shallow waters, especially near the lakes in Egypt's northeastern region. This is where the Wind Setdown Theory places the crossing. The wind would have been able to push the water aside in these shallow areas, creating a pathway. The Bible's description of the parting, the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left, may also be explained by the way the wind shifts and forces the waters to rise up on each side, forming walls of water. While the idea of natural forces being involved in the miracle might seem less dramatic than the notion of an instantaneous supernatural parting of the sea, it's important to remember that God can use the natural world to achieve His divine purposes. This theory underscores an important aspect of faith. God often works in ways we don't expect, weaving the natural and the supernatural together for His glory. The wind, a seemingly ordinary element, became the vessel for one of the most extraordinary acts of divine deliverance in history. But there's something even more profound to consider. God doesn't always act in the ways we imagine or in the dramatic, awe-inspiring ways we might expect. His methods might not always make sense in human terms, but they're always perfect in timing and purpose. The Israelites were in a place of desperation, trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, and God provided a way through what seemed like an impossible situation. This moment in the Exodus is a beautiful reminder that God is often at work behind the scenes, even in the most natural and ordinary things. Just as God used the wind to part the waters, He can use the circumstances of our lives, our challenges, trials, and even our everyday routines to guide us, protect us, and deliver us. We may not always see it in the moment, but just as God worked through the wind for the Israelites, He works through the mundane of our daily lives to accomplish His will. In our own lives, we may be facing situations where the path forward seems unclear or impossible. But God is constantly at work, and He is not limited by the circumstances around us. Even in what appears to be a dead end, He is preparing a way. Trusting in His guidance, even when it feels like the path is uncertain, is key to living a faithful life. Are there areas in your life where you're waiting for God to act in a big, dramatic way? Maybe God is already using something ordinary to work in your life. What do you need to trust God with today, even when it feels like He's working behind the scenes? 3. The drowning of Pharaoh's army. Shallow waters. Debate. Now, let's dive deeper into a critical question that challenges the theory of the Red Sea crossing near the shallow lakes. How could Pharaoh's army have drowned in such shallow waters? The Bible clearly states that when the waters returned after the Israelites had crossed, Pharaoh's chariots and army were overwhelmed by the returning waves. The waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them remained. Exodus 14:28. This verse seems to present a significant challenge to the Wind Setdown Theory, which places the crossing in the shallow lakes near Egypt. The problem arises when we ask, how deep were these waters, really? If the Israelites crossed through waters that were only 3 to 4 feet deep, as we would expect in these shallow lakes, then it seems highly unlikely that Pharaoh's army could have been drowned in such a setting. After all, even if the waters came rushing back after the wind stopped, it seems like the soldiers would have been able to stand up and survive in such shallow depths. But the Bible says they drowned, which raises the question, was this body of water truly shallow? The text speaks to something far more intense, a mighty, dramatic act of God's judgment, not just a few inches of water rushing over a group of people. When the sea parted and the Israelites crossed, the Bible says the waters stood like walls on both sides. Exodus 14:22. And when those waters returned to their place, they were not just pushing the Egyptians back a few feet. They wiped them out entirely. This is an act of justice, not just nature. For this reason, many scholars and theorists favor the second camp, which places the crossing at the Gulf of Aqaba, a much deeper body of water. The Gulf of Aqaba provides deeper waters that could more easily fulfill the biblical description of a powerful return of the sea, one that would have been deep enough to completely overwhelm Pharaoh's army, drowning them with no chance of survival. In fact, many believe that such dramatic depths are far more consistent with the awe-inspiring miracle described in Scripture, one where God's power is fully displayed and His judgment is clear and certain. When we imagine the magnitude of this event, it's important to reflect on the spiritual implications of the drowning of Pharaoh's army. The waters, which once parted to provide a path for the Israelites, returned to bring swift justice to those who had sought to destroy God's people. This wasn't just about physical deliverance. It was a powerful demonstration of God's judgment upon those who oppressed and rejected His will. It serves as a reminder that God's justice is real, and it comes with a certainty we cannot escape. The drowning of Pharaoh's army also symbolizes God's protection over His people. He provided a way for the Israelites to escape, and then He ensured that no one would ever be able to harm them again by the hand of Pharaoh. For us, this is a reminder that God's justice always serves a greater purpose. His protection may seem delayed at times, but in His perfect timing, He will deliver us from harm. So how does this apply to our own lives? How often do we face situations where we feel trapped or oppressed? How often do we see those who oppose us seemingly thriving? It's easy to feel like justice is slow or absent. But the story of the Red Sea is a powerful reminder that God will deliver us and bring justice, no matter how impossible our circumstances may seem. Like the Israelites, we can trust that God's deliverance and His justice are unstoppable, even when the enemy seems to have the upper hand. We might not always understand His timing, but we know that when He acts, it's always for our good and His glory. His protection and His judgment are always executed with love and purpose, and we can take heart knowing that He will never abandon us to the forces of evil. Is there a situation in your life where you're waiting for God's justice or deliverance? How can you trust in His timing, knowing that He will act at the right moment? What areas in your life need God's intervention today? And how can you stand firm in faith, just as the Israelites did by the Red Sea? 4. The Gulf of Aqaba Theory. Deeper waters. Now, let's shift our focus to the second theory, which places the crossing of the Red Sea at the Gulf of Aqaba, a much deeper and more dramatic location than the shallow lakes near Egypt. According to this theory, the miracle that occurred in this area would have been far more spectacular, fitting the biblical description of walls of water standing on both sides of the Israelites as they crossed. The key to understanding this theory lies in the natural geography of the Gulf of Aqaba. Unlike the shallow lakes, which would have been only a few feet deep, the Gulf of Aqaba is much deeper, with some parts of the sea dropping to depths of over 1,000 meters, about 3,280 feet. The location that proponents of this theory propose is at the very edge of the Gulf, where there is a natural flat area with a gentle slope. This slope, combined with the natural geography of the area, could have created a plausible path for the Israelites to walk through, especially if God performed His miracle and parted the waters. The dramatic nature of this theory matches the grandeur of the biblical account. The Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. Exodus 14:22. For the waters to stand up like walls, we would expect a larger body of water with substantial depth, something that could truly be called a miracle. The Gulf of Aqaba, with its deeper waters, offers an opportunity for this grand miracle to take place. The water would have been deep enough for the biblical description of a mighty wall, creating an awe-inspiring visual of God's power. One of the most striking features of this location is that it fits the description of dry ground mentioned in the Bible. Despite the water surrounding the path, the Israelites were able to cross safely. Geographically, the Gulf of Aqaba also offers the kind of terrain that could have allowed the Israelites to walk across a large, dry area without sinking into deep mud, as we might expect in other bodies of water. The location's gradual incline, combined with the unique slope of the sea floor, makes it plausible for such an event to have taken place. For those of us who live by faith, the idea of God intervening in such a dramatic way, parting a vast sea to deliver his people, reminds us of his sovereignty and power. When we face challenges in our lives, whether it be financial struggles, relationship troubles, or health crises, it is often easy to think that there is no way out. We might feel trapped, as if no path exists for us to walk. But just as God parted the sea for his people, he is fully capable of parting the obstacles in our lives when the time is right. This powerful display of divine intervention not only provides the Israelites with the physical space to escape, but also reaffirms their trust in God's protection and provision. Their faith in God, in walking through the parted waters, was the key to their deliverance. Similarly, for us, the path to deliverance often requires us to take that first step in faith, even when the waters look impossibly high. In moments of personal crisis or spiritual dryness, the Gulf of Aqaba theory offers us a metaphorical reminder of God's ability to act decisively in our lives. Even when we think our situation is too deep, too difficult, or too overwhelming, God can create a path where we see none. He can bring us from despair into deliverance with a level of power and grace that is beyond our understanding. So, how does this apply to our everyday lives? When faced with challenges, do we trust that God will open up a path just like he did for the Israelites? Or do we lean into our own limited understanding, assuming there's no way forward? The Gulf of Aqaba theory reminds us that God's ways are higher than our ways, and that no obstacle is too great for his power to overcome. We can trust in his miraculous intervention, even when it seems impossible. Can you think of a time when God made a way for you, when you felt there was no way forward? How did that moment shape your trust in his ability to deliver you from hardship? How can you apply this belief to the challenges you face today? 5. Mount Sinai debate. Where was it located? Now that we've explored the possible locations of the Red Sea crossing, let's turn our attention to another key element in the Exodus journey, Mount Sinai, the place where Moses received the Ten Commandments from God. The location of Mount Sinai has been the subject of debate for centuries, with two main camps proposing very different places. Some traditionalists believe Mount Sinai is located in the Sinai Peninsula, but there's also an emerging theory that suggests the true Mount Sinai is located in Saudi Arabia, in a region known as Jebel al-Lawz. The Sinai Peninsula has long been considered the traditional location for Mount Sinai. This is where countless historical accounts, maps, and even early Christian traditions have placed the mountain. There's a significant amount of historical weight behind this location, as some of the earliest church fathers, as far back as the 4th century, spoke of Mount Sinai being in the Sinai Peninsula. In fact, a monastery was built at the foot of the mountain in the 6th century AD to commemorate the site. Over time, this tradition became well established in both Christian and Jewish faiths. However, there's a growing movement in favor of the theory that Mount Sinai is actually located in Saudi Arabia. This theory is based on several pieces of evidence, including geography, ancient landmarks, and archaeological findings that seem to align with the biblical description of the Exodus. Those who support this theory point to the fact that the Bible describes Moses traveling east from Egypt, which would have placed the Israelites in the land of Midian, located in modern-day Saudi Arabia. This region aligns with descriptions of where Moses lived before his encounter with God at the burning bush, and it's a logical place for the Israelites to have traveled after escaping Egypt. One of the key pieces of evidence supporting the Saudi Arabian theory is the presence of Jebel al-Lawz, a mountain in the northwestern part of Saudi Arabia that has been suggested as the real Mount Sinai. This mountain is much more isolated and rugged than the traditional Sinai Peninsula location, making it a much more likely candidate for the site where Moses encountered God in his full glory. This theory suggests that the Israelites camped around this area after their escape from Egypt, where they received God's commandments, and that the mountain was the site of the thunder, lightning, and fire that accompanied God's presence. What makes Jebel al-Lawz even more intriguing is the presence of several ancient structures in the area, such as altars and rock carvings, which some believe are linked to the events in the Exodus story. For example, there is a large altar-like structure at the base of the mountain, as well as stones that some believe could be related to the biblical account of the golden calf incident. These potential archaeological discoveries offer compelling evidence that this mountain may indeed be the true Mount Sinai, though much of the research remains controversial and has yet to be fully verified by the wider academic community. The debate over the location of Mount Sinai holds deep spiritual significance for us today. Mount Sinai is more than just a geographic location. It's the place where God made a covenant with His people, giving them His law and setting them apart as His chosen nation. For us, Mount Sinai symbolizes our own encounters with God and the deepening of our relationship with Him. It's a place of revelation, where God speaks and reveals His will. This debate about Mount Sinai raises an important question. Where do we go to encounter God in our lives? Just as the Israelites journeyed to a specific place to receive God's law, we too must seek out moments of spiritual growth, be it through prayer, reading scripture, or seeking God in our everyday lives. The story of Mount Sinai teaches us that God's voice is still speaking today, calling us to new heights of faith, obedience, and devotion. So, whether you believe the traditional location in the Sinai Peninsula or the newer theory of Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, the truth is that God's presence is not confined to a specific place. He meets us where we are, and the power of His revelation can transform our lives, just as it transformed the lives of the Israelites. What role does seeking God in specific places or moments play in your life? How do you create space for spiritual encounters with Him, whether in sacred places or everyday experiences? Let's reflect on how we can continue to seek God's presence and direction, just as Moses did on Mount Sinai. 6. Evidence for the Exodus route and Mount Sinai. As we continue our exploration of the Exodus route and the mystery of Mount Sinai's true location, let's take a closer look at the evidence that may support the Saudi Arabian theory for Mount Sinai. While the traditional location in the Sinai Peninsula has its supporters, those advocating for the Saudi Arabian theory point to archaeological discoveries that may provide a deeper connection to the events described in the Bible. This evidence is exciting as it brings to light ancient markers and remnants that might align with the Exodus journey. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence comes from archaeological findings near Jebel al-Lawz, the proposed Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. Many believe that this mountain holds critical clues about the Exodus, particularly regarding the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. One striking discovery is a large rock-carved altar at the base of the mountain. The Bible mentions that after the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, they camped at the foot of Mount Sinai, and it's here where they would have received the 10 Commandments. Could this altar be the very place where the Israelites offered sacrifices, as the Bible describes? This altar is unique because it doesn't just look like a natural rock formation, it seems intentionally shaped, suggesting it could have been used for religious rituals. Along with the altar, there are other interesting finds in the vicinity, such as ancient petroglyphs or rock carvings. These carvings depict various animals, some resembling those worshipped by ancient cultures, like a calf. These engravings are especially significant because they may connect directly to the biblical incident of the golden calf, an event that occurred after the Israelites were delivered from Egypt, but before they received the commandments. While Moses was on the mountain receiving God's law, the people grew restless and fashioned a golden calf to worship, a grave sin that led to severe consequences. The connection between these petroglyphs and the golden calf incident is purely speculative at this point. But it's intriguing to consider that the people who camped near Jebel al-Lawz might have left behind evidence of their struggles with idolatry. Furthermore, there are ancient stone structures scattered across the region that some claim could be remnants of the Israelites' campsites. These structures are found in strategic locations along the route, further supporting the idea that this area was once a significant stopping point for the Israelites. Some researchers believe these could be the very campsites where Moses and the people set up camp after crossing the Red Sea. If this is true, it would dramatically shift our understanding of the Exodus journey, providing tangible proof of the Israelites' passage through this region. One of the most striking pieces of evidence is a large split rock found in the area, which is believed by some to be the rock from which Moses struck to bring forth water for the Israelites. The Bible recounts how, after the Israelites left Egypt and journeyed through the wilderness, they became thirsty and began to complain. Moses, at God's command, struck the rock and water poured out to quench their thirst. The rock at Jebel al-Lawz is over 50 feet tall and is split down the middle, which could be a natural phenomenon caused by the erosion of water. But many believe this is the very rock mentioned in the Bible. These archaeological finds are intriguing, but there's still much debate. For instance, the Saudi Arabian government has not allowed full archaeological digs in this area, which leaves many of these findings unverified by mainstream scholars. This lack of official research makes it difficult to draw definitive conclusions, but the evidence that is available adds an exciting layer to the ongoing debate about the Exodus and Mount Sinai's location. The spiritual significance of these findings is profound. Regardless of the exact location of Mount Sinai, the truth that emerges is that God's hand was on the Israelites every step of the way. Whether through miraculous provision of water from a rock, the parting of the sea, or the establishment of a covenant with his people, God was present in the lives of his people, guiding them through the wilderness to fulfill his promises. For us today, these discoveries remind us that God's presence and providence are tangible, even if we don't always see it clearly. The Israelites had to trust in God's guidance and provision in a seemingly barren wilderness, just as we are often called to trust him through our own challenges and uncertainties. These archaeological findings, whether verified or not, serve as a reminder that God's work in history is still unfolding, and his faithfulness continues to be evident in our lives. As we reflect on this, we can ask ourselves, how can we see God's guiding hand in our own lives, even when the path ahead seems uncertain or difficult? What wilderness are we walking through right now, and how can we trust in God's provision and faithfulness, just as the Israelites did thousands of years ago? 7. The role of faith and divine intervention. As we've journeyed through the roots of the Exodus, the historical evidence, and the locations of significant biblical events, we now find ourselves reflecting on a vital aspect of the story, the role of faith and divine intervention in the lives of Moses and the Israelites. It's easy to get caught up in the details of where the crossing happened or where Mount Sinai truly stands. But at the heart of this incredible story is a profound spiritual truth. Faith and God's divine intervention were the true forces driving the Israelites' journey. In Hebrews 11:29 we read, "By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned." This verse encapsulates the essence of the Exodus miracle. It was by faith that the Israelites crossed the parted waters, believing in God's promise to deliver them from slavery. Moses stretched out his hand, not knowing the exact outcome, but trusting in God's power to act on behalf of his people. Faith in God's promises is essential here. Even as they faced impossible odds, trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, the Israelites moved forward in faith. They could have turned back in fear or given in to despair, but instead they believed in God's word and his promise to free them. The same applies to us today. When we find ourselves facing what seems like an insurmountable obstacle, do we trust that God has the power to lead us through? Even if we don't know how he will do it, are we willing to take that step of faith, knowing that his intervention can turn our circumstances around? Faith is not just believing in the possibility of God's intervention. It's about surrendering to his will and accepting that he knows the best path for us. God's actions in the Exodus story were a direct result of the faith Moses had in his power. Moses didn't lead the Israelites out of Egypt because of his own abilities or wisdom. He did so because he had an unshakable trust in God's ability to fulfill his promises. This is where true leadership lies, trusting in God's direction and guiding others to follow, even when the way seems unclear. Moreover, the divine intervention in the story is something that cannot be overlooked. We often hear of the Red Sea parting and the dramatic destruction of Pharaoh's army, but behind every miracle, there is a loving, omnipotent God orchestrating the events. God didn't just part the waters, He ensured that they walked through on dry land, providing them with clear guidance and protection. Similarly, He made sure that Pharaoh's forces were utterly destroyed when the waters returned, displaying His complete control over the situation. This teaches us that God's intervention isn't just a one-time act, it's a continuous presence in the life of His people. When we talk about God's divine intervention today, it can sometimes feel like a distant concept. We live in a world where we rely on technology, medicine, and human wisdom to solve our problems. Yet God's power is no less available to us now than it was for Moses and the Israelites. His timing, though not always as we expect, is perfect. He will guide us when we need it most, just as He guided His people through the wilderness. In our daily lives, we are often faced with challenges that seem insurmountable. Whether it's a personal struggle, a relational conflict, or a financial crisis, the story of the Exodus reminds us that faith in God and His power to intervene is key to overcoming these obstacles. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and even helpless at times, but the Israelites show us that when we place our faith in God, He can move mountains or part seas. As we reflect on the faith of Moses and the Israelites, we are called to consider our own faith journey. How can we cultivate deeper trust in God's intervention in our lives? Are we relying on our own strength, or are we surrendering our challenges to God and believing in His ability to make a way when there seems to be none? Let's ask ourselves, in what areas of our lives do we need to step out in faith, trusting that God will act on our behalf? And when the seas of life seem to be closing in, can we, like Moses, trust that God is leading us through even if the way seems impossible? The lesson of the Exodus is clear. Faith in God's provision and intervention is what leads us to victory, just as it did for the Israelites thousands of years ago. Conclusion. As we conclude this exploration of the Exodus, we are reminded of the powerful truths that have transcended time. God's faithfulness, His provision, and His sovereignty over every circumstance. Whether we are debating the exact location of the Red Sea crossing or contemplating the historical significance of Mount Sinai, the central truth remains. God delivered His people with a mighty hand. His miraculous intervention was not limited to the past. It extends to us today, guiding us through our own journeys of faith. The story of the Exodus is more than just a historical event. It's a profound lesson on trusting God, even when the path seems unclear. The Israelites faced the impossible, trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army. But God, through His divine timing and intervention, made a way where there seemed to be no way. This is the same God we serve today, the one who is still in the business of parting seas, making paths, and delivering His people from their troubles. As we reflect on this journey, let's remember that faith and trust in God's timing are essential to navigating the challenges of life. When life presents us with seemingly insurmountable obstacles, we can stand firm knowing that God's promises are true and His power is limitless. Just as He led the Israelites through the wilderness, He is guiding us too, leading us to a future filled with His hope, provision, and victory. The story of Moses and the Exodus calls us to examine our own faith. Do we trust God in the midst of trials, or do we often find ourselves looking for a way out? The Israelites were delivered because they trusted God, not because they had all the answers or understood the entire plan. This story teaches us to lean into God's strength, even when we're uncertain of the outcome. His ways are higher than ours, and His timing is perfect. We can trust that even when things seem impossible, He will make a way. As we reflect on our own lives, let's ask ourselves, where is God calling us to step out in faith? What areas of our lives need His miraculous intervention? Just as God made a way for the Israelites, He is making a way for us, and our faith can be the bridge to experiencing His powerful deliverance. If the Exodus story has stirred something in your heart, I encourage you to reflect on where God is leading you today. Which part of this journey resonates with you the most? Are you facing a Red Sea moment in your own life where you feel trapped between the sea and the enemy? If so, take heart. God is with you. He has a plan for your deliverance. Leave a comment below and share how God has intervened in your life or how you're trusting Him to make a way through your challenges. Don't forget to like this video if you found this exploration meaningful and share it with someone who might need encouragement. Subscribe to this channel for more insightful videos that will help strengthen your faith and guide you through life's challenges. Have you ever experienced a moment in your life where you felt completely trapped, but God made a way for you? How did your faith impact that situation, and what did you learn from it? Share your story in the comments below, and let's encourage each other as we walk in faith.